Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Listen Up. We usually talk about what is your relationship with your money, and we're definitely working towards finding out what that relationship is and repairing it if there's some loss or some lost pieces or something to that relationship. But we really want to continue on the continuation or the part two of the post-traumatic stress disorder and the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. We wanted to tackle this issue because, you know, this time of the year, we're at the end of the year, the last quarter of the year, and we have, a lot of heaviness that goes on. And oftentimes, instead of dealing with it, we suppress it and we keep suppressing it and we don't talk about it. We have the stigma against mental health disorders and, a shame attached to it, right? So I want to be a part of that, that help or that aid to, as my dad used to always say, take those glasses off, and really see what's happening and what's going on. And then we can find a way to overcome it, to get deep down and pull all of that toxicity out of our system. But before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share this information with somebody else. Somebody out there is hurting on the inside and really need to hear, if not my voice, but at least hear the message. As always, we're going to go over to Grandma's cookie jar first before we get into our total topic today. And I'm going to actually repeat part one, because part one of post-traumatic stress, I thought it was so important. We pulled out, go where you feel most alive. And I think that sometimes we don't think about it or give thought to it. What makes you feel alive? Giving ourselves more of that, feeding our spirits, feeding our soul, more of what makes us come alive. But not doing it to the extent that it becomes self-medicating, right? And I always say this at the beginning or say it in our disclaimers. I'm not a licensed therapist or naturopathic wellness coach, all things wellness over here, right? And that means mind, body, and spirit. So that's why we're tackling the issues, because if we're full of stress and tension, we really can't even think about what we need to do in a more healthy manner with our money or relationship to our money. So we're tackling all the issues that circle around us being whole completely, right? Mind, body, spirit, and especially in our finances. Money is a defense and a shield, and that helps us, right, to have a different experience, right? So go where you feel most alive. Sometimes I say it's a great thing to just sit back, close our eyes, and take a 5 minute away from everything. We have so much busyness coming at us all day long. The things, right? So it's just a good idea for us to start focusing in on ourselves. It's not a selfish thing, right? It's not selfish at all. Back of it says one day or day one, you decide. We repeated that from part one day or day one. So are we saying that today is going to be our day one, right? Today going to be our day one to understand what the side effects or symptoms of post-traumatic stress is. I pulled an article that was updated on October the 6th, 2022 for PTSD Awareness Month. It's from Better Health the editorial team, right? So, it was updated by Better Health editorial team, but it was written by, didn't really say or give credit to who it was written by, but it is a Better Health, HELP article, okay? Wanted to just go back over just a little bit about understanding that post-traumatic stress is a disorder, right? It is a mental disorder. And oftentimes when you're not around empathetic people, they won't understand that, right? And sometimes we don't even understand it enough to give ourselves that, that empathetic ear. Like what do we say to ourselves? Are we making ourselves, do we feel like, oh my gosh, it's, oh, wow, it's just something just wrong with me because I'm having these issues. Well, something may be a little bit off, but it's okay to embrace it and then get a solution or a resolution for it, right? So it says here that, oh, wait a minute, I keep trying to do this like I'm 25, y'all. I keep trying to read and I squint and I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I'm giving you all the good information. Maybe I need a little tea to wet my whistle too, huh? Our mug of the day still says simply blessed, and it's simply blessed when we educate ourselves. Okay, it says that people don't often understand that exposure to traumatic events is a serious issue that often requires professional help. Sometimes the family are the reason for the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress, especially if you went through childhood abuse or have a history of substance abuse. So substance abuse, it becomes like a repeated cycle, right? Because if it's substance abuse in the household, maybe the parent might be self-medicating, right? Because life can be hard. So maybe the parent is self-medicating, and then it trickles down, right? If you are experiencing PTSD that comes from severe stress, substance misuse, hypervigilance, flashbacks, anger outbursts, or other symptoms, you don't have to go through life feeling that you're constantly on the edge or being triggered by a traumatic event, as these are all common reactions, right? Very, very common. So, do I have a stress disorder, or is it really PTSD? Because there's additional stress disorders, and it may not be PTSD, but PTSD falls into the category of stress disorders in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and both of them are mental health disorders. So they talked about complex PTSD, and they talked about ASD, and it's still having to do with trauma, right? Acute stress disorder, we talked about that in part 1, so go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't listened to it and you just jumped ahead here. We talked about what acute is, and acute is if something happened traumatic and the symptoms or side effects only last for a month or so. But when it goes into deeper than that, then that's when it's deemed PTSD or post-traumatic stress. Okay, so I'm going to skip down because we did cover some of this in part 1, but we just really wanted to see what the 22 symptoms of PTSD is in adults. There are 22 symptoms of PTSD in adults, and they fall into 3 main types of traumatic stress symptoms. The 3 main types of traumatic stress symptoms are, hope you all have your handy notebooks available. Number 1, having flashbacks, nightmares, or mental re-experiencing the trauma. So mentally re-experiencing the traumatic event. This can come up in a few weeks or less after the event. Number 2, feeling numb, avoiding things that remind you of the traumatic event, feeling disassociated, right? Number 3, having increased mental or emotional arousal may cause you to have difficulty sleeping or concentrating. So when you feel that stress level coming, you may start now to have concentration issues or focusing issues, right? You may feel jumpy, irritated, or angry. Angry outbursts are sometimes common in PTSD, right? So, but if it's anxiety and depression, well, according to Anxiety and Depression Association of America, ADAA, your doctor may diagnose you with PTSD during treatment if your traumatic stress symptoms affect you more than a month after you've experienced it. But that's another, and I say for the lack of knowledge we perish. So we have to grab a little bit of information and knowledge and start putting together, our reference tools, right? So they're saying in order to receive that PTSD, in order to know that it's PTSD, it falls into a couple of traumatic stress incidents or events. One, if you're directly experiencing a traumatic event, right? Number 2, if you witness a traumatic event in a person, and that's where mine was triggered initially, from witnessing a traumatic event when I was 3 years old. Number 3, learning that a traumatic event occurred to a close family member or a close friend where there was actually a threat of death that was involved, or that was violent or accidental, whether it was violent or accidental. So, man, that helps you to understand, or helps me to really understand and key in on, okay, that's where that part came from. Number 4, experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to adverse accounts of a traumatic event. Again, going through domestic violence, that would signify an experience of repeated or extreme exposure to adverse events, right? So, for example, stress-related symptoms that affect mental health are common in first responders, such as police officers, firefighters, or medical personnel, where they deal with life and death situations regularly. The ADAA notes that mental health disorders related to stress disorders don't apply to those who experience traumatic stress as a result of exposure to electronic media like television, movies, or photos, unless the stress disorder is related to their job. Okay, that's so they're saying that in their notes or information or studies, it's not a traumatic event if you're watching it happen on a TV or something like that. But if you or in a video or something like that, but if it's something true to your life, so it's not something that you're witnessing that way, but you're hearing about it happening to somebody you know or such. So that's really good information to know as well. To be classified as PTSD, one or more of the following symptoms or traumatic stress must be present in the first category of the stress disorder. 1, spontaneously having a recurrent involuntary memory that caused traumatic stress that is intrusive and distressing. Okay. ADAA adds that children express traumatic stress by acting out the traumatic event repeatedly during play, which shows its significant impact. Okay. Having dreams that cause traumatic stress where it stirs emotions related to the event. Children may experience traumatic stress after having scary dreams they don't understand. Number 3, having flashbacks or other traumatic stress reactions where you feel the traumatic event is reoccurring. Number 4, having intense stress for prolonged periods that affect your mental health when you're exposed to internal or external triggers, that's a buzzword, I'll come back to that make you think about the event in day-to-day life. Number 5, having responses or mental arousal symptoms when something triggers a memory of the traumatic event. Okay. And they're also saying to be classified as PTSD, one or more of the following PTSD symptoms of traumatic stress must be present for the secondary category of the stress disorder. Number 10, not being able to remember significant details from the traumatic event. This may be due to having a head injury or due to being under the influence of alcohol, having persistent negative or negative thoughts about yourself, others, or the world that prevent you from feeling joy and happiness, continuously blaming yourself or someone else about why the traumatic event occurred, having feelings of fear, horror, anger, shame, or guilt that persistently affect your mental health, not feeling up to participating in activities that you formerly enjoyed, having feelings that you are detached from others or that you are more of a stranger to them, have difficulty keeping your mental health in a positive space, okay? Consistently feeling irritable and showing aggressive behavior, acting out in a reckless or self-destructive manner, feeling hypervigilant, on the edge, or walking on eggshells, I say, having an exaggerated, startled response, having problems concentrating, not being able to fall asleep or experience restlessness in your sleep. The ADAA adds that stress disorders can also be attributed to having impaired social or occupational function that isn't related directly to prescription medication, alcohol, or drugs. Stress disorders can also be caused by other types of medical conditions and risk factors, such as traumatic brain injury. So they said talk to your physician about that. And they say there are some treatments for PTSD in adults. Okay, and they're saying this is not a comprehensive list, but this is a just to kind of give you some of the treatments that are there to help you. PTSD symptoms can be fully manageable with time, and like any other mental illness, it can help. So they're saying that there are a couple of things that they say that they combine together, which consists of exposure to therapy and cognitive restructuring, cognitive process therapy, EMDR. So these are all technical terms, but I'll read them anyway just to finish the article. Prolonged exposure to therapy, stress training, internal family systems, support groups, family therapy, sex assault therapy, spiritual, faith-based therapy, and other sorts of therapy. So one of the things that they're saying is, and that I agree, is that to be aware. I love the awareness factor, to make sure that you understand. And I think part of it is taking the shame out of it. Something is wrong with me because something happened to me. That's a part of being yeah, but I guess I want to say is it hurts you, right? It hurts you to feel like that you have this deficit, or this some people hide it, some people suppress it. I suppressed, and all that does, like we talked about in part one, and what we learned in our service on church, is that it just takes away that part of you is traumatized. It's sort of like when you're in a car accident, and your cells, they store the trauma, and until you just release it and learn how to like really meditate it and work through it, until you let it go, every time a car screeches or something, you jump, because that's still in your cells, it's stored trauma. And I don't think we understand or talk about trauma enough. We start to blame the person because we say, snap out of it, get over it, just get up and do, because we don't understand. And I think that's why a lot of folks aren't more empathetic towards other people that are suffering, because it is a suffer. You are suffering a torment when you are suffering through mental illness, and you don't know. You look okay, but actually inside you're not okay. So again, I hope this transparency and bringing this even more awareness. I know we do a lot in October about PTSD awareness or mental health awareness, but I still think that everybody can't receive from everybody. And sometimes somebody, I've heard great things about, this is really helping them, as far as me being transparent and having a podcast that address all things wellness. We don't stay just on one specific topic, because your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, your money health, all of that plays a part in the overall wellness. And that's the vision for the podcast, is to help other people to really, really identify, relate to somebody, and most importantly, get help, so that we can be our full self and walk in our purpose. So again, don't forget, I know this was a heavy topic today, and I promise you're going to get back to some more lighter issues, but it was on my heart to share that, and then when people reach out, and I know that there's a lot of people that's suffering in silence, and I just want to be that transparent, voice to say, hey, there is help out there. If you're suffering from this, just like John Walsh did for me when I was in domestic violence, and he said, if this, and this is a part of, your daily life, then you are in domestic violence, and there's a way out, and sometimes you just need to hear something simple that'll help you to reinforce that. So again, it's not a weakness to have a mental health disorder. I think the weakness is when we suppress it and we hide it and we don't go and get help for it, right? So anyhow, and this is no judgment zone. I'm transparent, no judgment, right? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share this information with somebody else. And if you haven't seen part one, I'm going to connect it here so you can see part one. Also have a link in the description box so you can grab your journal. All righty. Bye for now, and stay fearless.